I'm going to show you today how to make a fabulous autumnal door wreath using a really surprising item. Now, I do a lot of needle felting, and what I tend to find is I'll make these items as part of tutorials and then I won't do anything with them and they'll just kind of languish in the back of my cupboard to the felting world that time forgot and won't get used again. So what I like to do is use them in other upcycles. So today I'm going to use some old projects that I made last year. So I've got this posable pumpkin man. Now, I'm a bit of a geek when it comes to anything involving 1980s films and puppetry, and I was really inspired to make this chap by watching Return to Oz with Jack Pumpkinhead, so he's kind of inspired by him. So I made him last year and I haven't done anything with him, so I thought he would sit nicely on my door wreath. I've also got a pumpkin that I made as part of a tutorial, and a couple of very autumnal needle felted mushrooms as well. Now, clearly there isn't enough items here to make my door wreath. I need other stuff to fill it out. Now, I went to the range the other day, and for any of you not in the UK, it's effectively a bit like Michael's in the States or something like that. So they've got loads of hobby stuff there. So they had kits there specifically for making your own door wreath. But the kits were predominantly plastic, which I don't like because that's not good for the environment. And in addition to that, they were £10 each. And there wasn't actually enough stuff in the kits to kind of cover a whole one of these wreaths. So you'd have to buy 2 kits. So that would be £20 worth of plastic. And then I thought to myself, surely there must be a more cost-effective way of filling out this wreath than just buying loads of unnecessary plastic and paying a fortune for it at the same time. So then I started wandering around the range, and I was just wandering, and then I saw it. And my eyes fixated on this. Potpourri. Now, stick with me here. I know most people associate potpourri with late 1980s, early 90s, their mums having big bowls of it in the house, and then anybody that came into the house would be instantly asphyxiated with the smell of lavender and rose. But I thought, in here, there is a treasure trove of items that I can use to fill out my wreath with. And not only that, it will also smell of delicious orange. Now, to make today's wreath, you don't have to have these needle felted items. You can use natural items as well, although I will be posting some tutorials online for how you can make these if you do want to do that. But you can use things like pine cones, you can use conkers, you could dry out fruit like oranges and lemons. There's loads of other stuff you can add to this to make it look really effective and incorporate the potpourri into it as well. So the first thing you need to do is get a polystyrene ring. So I'm going to move these out the way. Now, I've got a 28cm polystyrene ring here, and as you can see, the back is completely flat, so it sits nice and flush against the door once everything is made. I wouldn't tend to go for anything with the curved back as well, because I just don't find that it sits as nicely. You can go with any size you want to, but just bear in mind that the bigger you go, the more stuff you're going to need to fill out your polystyrene ring, and you want it to look really effective and everything really crammed in. So just sort of think about that when you're choosing what size ring you want to go for. And actually, when this is full of stuff, it's going to look a lot larger than it does at the moment in my hands. So the next thing you're going to need is either some ribbon in an autumnal colour or some felt material like I have here. So I've gone for a brown felt material here purely because it was the only colour in my craft box that resembled any kind of autumnal colour, and I had an orange a while ago but I've used it all up. So brown will do today, and actually it's just going to be the base, so it doesn't matter too much what the colour is if I'm honest, but if you get little bits peeking through, you ideally want it to be something that fits in with the rest of the items that you're going to be putting onto your wreath later. So I'm going to plug in my glue gun and start letting that heat up whilst I start chopping up my material. So you're going to need some fabric scissors. Now, I've got these ridiculously small embroidery scissors here because I can't get to my fabric scissors at the moment for reasons that I won't bore you with, but ideally you want to have proportionate scissors for the job, but today I'm going to use these ones and just, you know, make my life more difficult. So what you want to do is cut some strips, and I would say they need to be about 2 inches in width, and as long as you can get them, because we're going to wrap this around our wreath. It doesn't have to be exact in terms of the dimensions. It can be really rough because we're not going to see this really, but I would aim for about 2 inches in width just to get a bit more coverage. You don't want to go too thick because then it becomes really awkward to then wrap it round evenly. So I'm going to take this strip here. So I've added some cord to the top of my wreath for where it's going to hang, and you just want to make sure you've got a really strong knot so it holds nicely on your door frame. And then I'm going to take my first strip of brown, I'm going to start at the top and I'm going to use as much glue as possible, and I'm going to wrap this brown material around my wreath nice and tightly. It's really important that you make sure that all the material is glued down as much as possible, because what will happen is if there isn't enough glue there, when you start adding your items on, it's going to sag and then it's not going to sit nicely and they may drop off, so it's going to cause you all kinds of issues. So just make sure that when you're adding the material, it's all really nicely adhered to that polystyrene ring. So I'm going to get my glue gun, hopefully it's hot enough. And just go really careful of your fingers when you're doing this, because I've previously burnt myself on a glue gun and wow, the pain was bad. And it was so bad that I had to go to minor injuries unit to get the nurse to look at it, because it was, my finger was very poorly. And I'm just going to press the material down, just so the glue spreads out a bit more so it adheres nicely to the ring. So I'm just going to keep going now. And as you're twisting the fabric around, you just want to make it so that probably about ½ centimetre of the fabric overlaps with the previous piece of fabric. So you've got no gaps. So I'm just going to get with a bit more glue. Felt material is quite good for this because there's a bit of stretch to it as well. So you can really pull it around the ring and get it nice and taut. There you go. One down, just another 50 to go. Now you should eventually end up with something that looks similar to this. So the entirety now of my wreath is covered in the brown felt fabric. The next thing to do is take my larger items and attach those to the wreath first. The first item to add is my Jack Pumpkin head. Now usually when you're using a larger item, ideally you want 2 similar sized items so you can place them either side of the wreath, and that way it just helps to balance the wreath so it's not going to be wonky, heavier on one side than the other. However, he's actually very light and I only have one. So I'm going to risk it for a biscuit and I'm just going to stick him on. I'm not going to have a counterweight on the other side, and hopefully it will still sit nice and evenly. So I'm going to place him on first and I'm going to have him sitting inside the wreath here. So I'm just going to add him on. So Jack's been stuck on, he's looking over the moon about it. Now I'm going to add on my other pumpkin and my mushrooms. It's all about personal preference now really, and where you want things to go, where they look right. And it's always worth bearing in mind that certain things, if they're high, like this mushroom, they're going to sit proud of the wreath. And if you're going to have other stuff that's going to be as high, it will probably work. But just be cautious that this isn't going to stick out tremendously and then you're going to have everything else really flush and it might look a bit odd. So that's just something to bear in mind really when you're adding your items. If you've got lots of items this size, then it's going to work, but if you've only got a couple, it might look a bit odd. So just be a bit cautious when you're adding things on. So I'm going to place one on the side, I think on the side there. I think I'm going to put one by Jack's head, and then the pumpkin, I think I'm going to have the pumpkin here. So I'm going to add those on. Now I've added on my larger items, the next thing to do is crack open the potpourri and start adding those fillers on. This wreath not only is going to look beautiful, but it's going to smell beautiful as well. It's got this lovely orange aroma to this stuff. And the great thing about potpourri is that you get different sized items. You always get the feature items, don't you? The larger ones, and then you get the smaller items intermingled. So these are going to work perfectly as fillers on my wreath. So I'm going to add the larger items first. Got this cool kind of peony shaped item here, so I'm going to add these on, and it's just all about going with what you think looks right and works. There's no hard and fast rules with this. It's all about just using your eye and going with what you like. And then once you've added on the larger items, you can start adding on your more medium-sized items and then work your way down to the small ones. So I'm just going to start fixing things where I think they look good. And the key with this is just don't overthink it. If you think it looks good, just stick it there. At the end of the day, it's got to be right for you. I've spent so much time asking people their opinions on things that I make. And then when they tell me, oh no, I don't like that, I take it really personally, but actually, at the end of the day, it's got to be right for you, and everyone's got their own idea of what looks good and what doesn't. So just go with what you think and don't worry about other people. Now, I really love doing stuff like this because it really makes me focus on the task in hand, because I'm a massive overthinker and ruminator. And what I tend to find is that I'll focus on things that have happened during the day, interactions I've had with other people, and I'll really analyse how I've come across. So I'll think to myself, oh my goodness, did I come across as rude to that person? I said this thing to them and they reacted in that way. So maybe they think I'm a really rude person. Maybe they don't like me. Oh no, what if they don't like my personality? What if they're going home now and they're thinking how rude I am, or how they find me offensive, or something like that, you know, really overthinking things. And it's ridiculous, isn't it? No one's going to focus that much on an interaction they've had with a person, but I'm a real worrier and I'll just kind of overthink it and really beat myself up about it. And by doing something like this, it just means I can just take my mind off it and focus on making something look pretty. And if I burnt myself with the glue, it makes me focus even more because it really hurts. And then I'm definitely not thinking about what else has happened in the day because I'm focusing on the pain in my finger. These are great. They're like little kind of nuts, aren't they? I think these are really cool. I think my fingers are going to be impregnated with orange scent for quite a while. You just want to keep going with this until you've completely covered the wreath. So I'm going to be back in a bit once I've added everything. So I think I'm finished and I'm really pleased with how it's turned out. I've added as much potpourri as I can to really fill it out and give it that lovely seasonal autumnal look to it. This has cost me less than a tenner to make. The potpourri itself was £5 from the range, which is significantly better value than spending £10 times 2 on 2 wreath making kits. So, you know, you're saving yourself £15 already. The polystyrene wreath was £2.70 from eBay, and then the rest of it I've already had. But like I said, you don't have to use needle felted items. You can use conkers, you can use pine cones, you can use anything you want to. You could even just use the potpourri as well, because that I think looks really effective on its own. So if you fancy making yourself a wreath this autumn, have a go at using potpourri because it's just really effective, and it's also a really lovely therapeutic mindful craft that just takes you out of your head and gets you to really focus on making it look beautiful. So I hope you enjoyed this. I will see you again soon. Take care. Bye.